Today I'm going to fix some small errors. I think just this thing here, and I'm going to fix the label position because I changed the size of the nodes and then I realized that the position of the label is fixed. So when you change the size of the nodes, it overlaps the label. And then after I fix these things, I'm going to study VisJS edge types. I think the physics is not difficult to implement. I think they implement the same physics for everything, for every type of edge, but the edges are different, and I want to see if there is a equivalent. I think I'm just gonna focus on one type, which I think it looks the better, and is different than the one that I have now, because obviously I'm using three.js, so I'm using a class. So I have to see. So my goal is to see if I can find a three.js class that is gonna be similar to this one. And I was trying to fix the arrows yesterday, but then I realized that it's too difficult for now, so I'm gonna think about that later. And it becomes very annoying because then I have to put a bunch of different functions and like a bunch of different functions in a bunch of different places. And the way that I did now was just copy the functions that I had in one file into the other one because it's it seems like it was easier to organize and to read. But then if I want to make the arrows work, I'm gonna have to refactor everything because there's gonna be too many functions, so it's gonna be better to use the same functions from the same files. So it needs a lot of work because you have to think about the rotation and for some reason when I was rotating the arrows, the edges started being on top of the arrows and things like that. So, and also the labels as well, I have to see the rotation, which is gonna be very hard. So I'm gonna leave this stuff for later because I think is like details, and it's probably better to spend my time trying to fix the other stuff, like trying to solve the other parts of the program, so that I have the full system working. Once I have the full system working, then I think I can worry about this stuff. But the type that I want to make it work is this dynamic, because I think is the best, and I think that is different from the way that I have there, and I want to understand why. Because the way that I have, it seems like a lot more fixed, and here it's like the edges are plastic, and in the one that I have, they're fixed. I think when you disable this, like it's closer to the way that I have there, but it still feels like it's not 100% the same thing, and I don't understand why. So yeah, but I think I'm gonna fix the label first. So what I'm thinking about doing is just making the position of the label dependent on the radius of the nodes. That would be the best, I think, if I can make that happen. So I have to open everything again because I closed. Just solve all the other stuff. I think I'm gonna put some music as well. And I don't think I'm gonna spend a lot of time here today because I have to. Not I have to, but I want to make some videos for TikTok and for Twitter. I wasn't gonna make a video for TikTok, but then the build space thing, they said that you gain extra credit, and I thought like it reminded me of TikTok because I never use TikTok. I hate TikTok, and shorts I think is like cancer for your brain. So I never use it, and then I forgot that I had it, and I think it's a good idea because why not post videos there as well for my stuff. So I think I'm gonna make 2 different videos, one for Twitter and one for TikTok. It's probably gonna take some time as well. I also have to simplify the graph store. Maybe I'll do that now. Yeah, so here I changed the functions. I added these functions. They got arrows, positions, and things like that. And I put it inside of the line. And before I was doing outside here. I was calling it here, but then now I'm calling the function from the other one. And I'm passing this variable here because I think it's better to leave the option like as default as undirected because it's gonna be less stuff to draw. So I think that it makes more sense to put it like this. And then I was thinking about where can I put it? Like I didn't want to return the mesh here because then when it's undirected, there isn't gonna be a value there, and then I'm gonna have to change everything else. So I decided that it's better to just pass the edge to this function. Also because there was different values here. And then by passing on this function, I can just put as properties of the edges. And also now I realize that it's much better to just leave as the nodes and edges to control everything and not put everything on the meshes because there's so many different things that I'm putting there as attributes for the nodes and edges. And there's probably going to be more as this becomes more complex. So I think it makes a lot more sense to keep the edges and nodes as the main data structure that is related to React and that makes the bridge, and then leave the mesh separately from that. And the way that I structured all the code for the simulation is based on the meshes as well. So it's another thing that is kind of but I think there isn't a problem because I'm probably not going to change, but I made it dependent on the group, the mesh group that contains the label and the nodes. So but I think I'm always going to do like that because I don't see a reason for doing differently. Yeah, but the way that they do it is based on this curve here from these other functions. They get the position, yeah, they get the length from the curve and the points. So this is another thing I have to think, because in the simulation the only thing that they do is create an invisible node in the middle way between the two different nodes. And then they, instead of creating the force from one node to the other, they create the force from one node to the middle of the node, to the middle, and then from the middle to the other node. So it creates two different types of forces when there's other types of edges. But I think it doesn't change anything because they still use the same function, so it doesn't change anything too much on the... Probably not at all, actually, because it's only changing the positions. I think the main thing that they change is the way that they draw the edge, and that's it. And every edge that has a curvy, that is not like the straight one, has a different way, different force, but they are all the same force. Oh, the dragging was annoying as well. And also I have to spend a bunch of time fixing a bunch of stuff, from when you change the layout to disable and enable physics, and when you change the solver to disable and enable physics. And also solve all the other solvers as well to make the work. And I think I'm still gonna optimize this a little bit, but only later on, because I think that I already did like a very small optimization, I think, which is just to reduce the amount of loops and to do stuff on the same loop, because it didn't make sense to me the way that they were doing. And I think I can optimize even more, because I think based on the way that they did it, it seems like they traded off a little bit of speed in order to have flexibility, because not all the solvers, but most of the solvers use the same central gravity force calculation. So in order to allow them to use the same one, it separated the functionality into that class, and then all of the other ones use the same class. But if you don't do it like that, and if you put the code inside of the solver itself, I think you can reduce the amount of loops that you have, because then you can just... It's running the same loop twice, and I don't think it's necessary. But it's not that big of a deal, I think. Because another thing that I get confused all the time is that I confuse the O(n) to the power of 2 with the O(n) when there's two different loops on a sequence. But if you have two different loops on a sequence, it doesn't increase exponentially the time. It's more linear. It's like 2 times n. And I always confuse that with when you have a nested loop, that increases the time exponentially. So And one of the solvers uses, I think the hierarchical and the recursion solver use this exponential time because it's based on the relationship between all of the nodes with each other. Yeah, but this is the part here that it decides. So if there is an edge type, which is a class from VisJS, it's gonna get this node that it creates on the class before, which is the node 2, and then it passes this to this function, which is the same one that works here. So I was thinking about, like, the only thing that I need is to create something that has the same, like, values here. I don't need to create a mesh as well. I could just, and I can do it here inside of this function as well. I was thinking about it. I don't need to create an extra node here. I could just put the condition based on whether or not the edge is curved, which is a boolean that I have there. Or I can make it based on the type, because if I have multiple different ones, then I'm gonna need another variable to specify which one it is. So the thing is, if I change this, I'm gonna have to change everything else here, because it depends, the logic for creating the edge depends on whether or not it depends on this boolean value here, curved, because there's only 2 different types. So I think if I put more, I'm gonna make this equal to a string, and then I put the value, I make the logic based on this string for selecting which edge it is. The issue, I'm still trying to think about a good way to, like, simplify all this. So I have, maybe I'm gonna create another function here on this file, or create another file just for this. I'm also thinking about separating, like, the nodes and edges functions in 2 different files, because there's a lot of functions now. In the beginning there wasn't that much, and I don't like when there's a lot of functions on the same file, because it gets very confusing. Yeah, but the problem is, like, here I can't use this function that I'm using here in the other parts of the project, because this one creates the mesh again, and the functions the logic to update the edge instead of creating one is different. So I think I'm gonna have to create another function that just updates the edge, and then I use that function in the other ones. But it's probably better to leave the function in the same file, because it's gonna use other functions here, I think. So maybe I'll do this stuff now. So let me focus on the label first, then I'll think about this stuff. Yeah, so this is the position here. So I think that's what I'm gonna do, is just change this to be the vector there. Now the question is it better to receive an argument here for the... I think instead of position I pass the radius for the node. I think it's better. And then here I make this, like, dependent on the radius. But then I'm gonna have to change this, obviously, to see how well it's gonna be there. The annoying thing about the rotation is that on the way that they did it on the other project, they use Spring, I think, or React Spring. And I think I'm gonna have to do, like, something inside of the use frame that... The problem is that I'm using the camera controls, and I have to study the camera controls to see how the rotation is gonna work and what's gonna happen when it rotates. And then based on that, you have to set the quaternion, I think, which is just a matrix that simplifies the calculations for changing the value of the thing. So, and there's somewhere here that they do this with the arrow. But I'm not really sure if I need to put that inside of the use frame or how that works. Maybe I can just set here and then it automatically changes. based on the camera, because the problem is I don't know the connection between this Quaternion here and the camera controls. If they're gonna, I assume that the way that it works is that it sets how much you want the thing to rotate based on the rotation of the camera, and then camera controls changes the rotation of the camera. So because they are both connected through the camera, then it works and you don't have to put it inside of the use frame. But I think this is something that I'm gonna worry about later, but maybe it is important. It's just annoying to think about this stuff, because I think that it is kind of important, both the label and the arrow, but it's just fucking annoying. So, and the problem is there's so much stuff to think about as well. There's so many more things to focus on. So here, how do I do this? Nodes, like radios. Yeah, at least I'm making a lot of progress, I think, so as long as I keep improving every day, eventually it's gonna be done, but still very annoying. And the most difficult part is thinking about how, like, when you change one piece of the code, it's gonna change everything else, so like this is the most annoying, because then I have to spend a bunch of time thinking like how to structure the arrows in a way that is gonna be good when I scale, if I want to change something in the future, or for the customization. Yeah, but I'm pretty happy that I made this. Also, I have to fix this. I have to allow for the dragging of this component as well. So maybe I'll focus on this stuff now, and then I'll think about it later. About the edge types later. So the way that it works on the physics engine from VisJS, they put a Boolean variable that is determined based on the velocities of the nodes. Every time that it calculates on the step, it's gonna see if one value is bigger than the other. It is like a threshold for how the amount of velocities on each node, and then if they are, then it returns true, and then if it returns true, then it stops calculating the physics. So it's like it turns off the physics once it reaches that threshold. But I think that the way that they did it on VisJS is they do it based on the events. So there's an event called data changed, and every time you change a node or edge, it sets off this event. And then on the physics engine, there's a function that is called data change, I think, that based on this event is gonna reinitialize the physics, I think. So the way that I do it was pretty similar. I created another variable. I think, I created on the store. I created as with use state first, but then I realized I realized that it's better to create it based on the store, because there's a lot of values here that like are dependent on that, because it was breaking when I changed the layout, and this enabled here. So how it works. There's still some situation here that I'm not really sure what's going on, but I think it's working fine, so it doesn't matter that much. Yeah, so what I want to see is the labels. So it looks like this is fine. Maybe I'll decrease 4 instead of 5. Now obviously I'm gonna change the size of the node to see. The other thing that is gonna be hard is for making this for smartphones, but I saw in the code sandbox website that has a similar kind of thing that I'm trying to achieve, how they do it on the smartphone, and it looks like it is a completely different site, and the only thing that it has is the ID and the browser, and it's based on a click. So I think they make a completely different thing for the smartphone, and I think that's probably not that important, to be honest, because most people are not going to use this on the smartphone, I think. So I'm gonna leave this stuff for like way later, once I have all the other stuff. I think this looks better, so I'm gonna leave it like this. And then I'm gonna think about the other stuff. Maybe I'll focus on the edges now. But yeah, the problem is that it looks like it is not increasing like by the same amount. It is. This is the issue, is the size of the node, the label. Yeah, it looks like it is closer and closer to the radios as well. So I think it's because of the way that it increases. Yeah, because I'm increasing linearly. Now let me think. I think instead of putting 5+, I need to make a based on the like this. Yeah, I think this way is always gonna be in the same spots. This has to be a percentage of the radios. Otherwise, it always, as the radius increases much more than the distance, because the distance is fixed. So let me think. I have to think if there's a way to... I think the font size is probably the thing that determines how big the text is gonna be. Text is gonna be. But it still looks fucked. Because it looks like the bigger it is gonna be. And probably... Oh, maybe it's because I just changed there, so... Yeah, I think this is fine. Then I'll change the font to say. And it's fine. Just put 20. Yeah, so the font size also has to be dependent on the node radius, I think. Maybe the 1.2 as well. Oh, actually it has to be a lot less because it's different units. I don't like this, it's gonna be too much. There's 25. That should be true. Oh. It's true, 25. It's 0.4. And I have to increase the distance. The problem is when it's smaller, if it's gonna work. What? I think it's because... Hopefully. Oh, there's also the size of the lines as well. So the question is, should I increase the size of the edge based on the size of the node? I think I'm gonna leave this stuff for later. I'm gonna make it based on the values on the edge here. Another thing that I can do is, instead of putting this component here, like the customization stuff, I can put it like on the side here as well. The thing is that in the beginning I'm not gonna use the IDE. I think I'm just gonna make it based on I'm gonna create the graph first, so I'm gonna separate the two parts, and then once I have that figured out, then I can, because for allowing user input, I think it's better just sandbox the user, and I'm gonna have to study a bunch of stuff related to that. I don't want to deal with that now. I think this works, so. I'm also not gonna focus on CSS too much as well. Because I think that, like, one of the biggest problems I have with CSS is that you need another, like, I'm gonna need a bunch of other stuff. And this is another thing that it's kind of overwhelming to think about, because I still have to figure out all the authentication process, the password stuff. It's gonna be very annoying, but I think that kind of stuff is a lot easier than these things here, hopefully. So, and I removed the Pixie visualization as well, because I thought that it doesn't make sense. I think it's better to just focus on this one now, and I was just leaving the other one there in case this one like didn't work or something like that, and then I can go back to the other one. But I think that I'm pretty far now into this one, so I deleted everything from the Pixie. Yeah, so now let me think. I think I'm gonna study the VisJS. Oh, the other thing that I created is the selected here on the group. And this is used so that, because one problem I was having is when I was dragging the nodes, it was like very unstable, and the reason why is because the physics calculation were still running. So when you click on the node and you move the mouse and then you stop, but you're still clicking on the node, the position stopped being set by the drag event, and the physics engine is still working. So what would happen is that the node would travel back for the position because of the physics engine, and then you would move again, and then you would teleport to the mouse, and it was very bad. So what I did was just create a variable here, and then based on this variable, I put it on the solvers, and it stops calculating the forces and the velocities for that node. Actually, only the velocities for the node. But I'm still not 100% sure if that's because I don't know. Maybe it's just the edges, but it feels like it is kind of slightly different here, but maybe not. Like, it feels a little bit different from the VisJS one, but I think it's probably just because of the edge types. And because the color of the graph. And also because the one that I have is 3D and the VisJS one is 2D. I'm trying to think about if there was... I think I was just thinking about other stuff that I need to refactor. The hierarchical string Also, the other thing that I did was delete some of the solvers. So one of the solvers, because it was based on the barn set implementation, and it was just changing the force based on the class. And because I'm implementing something completely different, because in 3 dimensions you have to use an octree, and in 2 dimensions you use a quad tree to calculate. So the way the barn set works is it separates the space into squares in 2D or cubes in 3D. And then based on the squares and the masses of the node, it creates a tree that connects all the nodes, and then based on the mass and the position on the squares of the nodes, it calculates the gravitational force. So it's a lot more complicated in 3D than it is in 2D, and I didn't want to spend all the time figuring out how to make it work, like how to translate the other solver to this one, so I just removed. So also I don't think that makes a lot of sense. I think it's also better to just focus on the barn set one because it's the best one. And then maybe I'll think about it later. Yeah, but the repulsion one, it doesn't, like, the physics doesn't seem like it changes that much. Because on the hierarchical repulsion, it uses a different spring solver. The other thing that I realized is that these solvers only work, like, they work better if you put level attributes on the nodes. So that's why it's not very different, the way that it looks. It's because the nodes don't have levels. But I assume that if you put different levels on different nodes, it's gonna calculate the forces in a different way. So it's gonna give probably a hierarchical, like, it's gonna, based on the levels, it's gonna create the visualization. And that's the difference between this one and the barn set, I think. Like, one of the main differences. This is the function that they use to position the node. So I was thinking about putting this one inside of the spring solver, and then I just calculate this. There's something else I was just talking about that I had to do as well. I forgot. So the question is it worth putting this here? Maybe the difference is that, like, it's less efficient if I create the thing each time here. So maybe it is better to create another node. And then the only thing that I would do is not put the like not create on the visualization, just create the object and call group, and then I put the positions on the group. So maybe first, before figuring this out, I should I think I'm gonna delete this. I should change from using a flag variable in using a string to determine whether or not the edge is curved. I'm trying to figure out, because I forgot which one. I think is on the get curve. Yeah, this one. Yeah, so this is the thing. So here, instead of returning like this, I have to put if else statements and then make based on the string value. And this is the thing that I think is going to be hard, because here, yeah, but I think the physics is always the same. So like the only thing that changes is that this function, like on VisJS, they use some functions on 2D to determine like the shape of the curve based on the 3 points, and here they're using this function here based on the positions of the 2 different nodes. So the question is we will have to create another. This is the thing that I was thinking about before, is that it seems like this point is the one in the middle, because the Bezier curves are based on 3 points, the from 2, and the invisible node is going to be somewhere along the line, and I think that this is the point of that node. And then because the physics is based on these nodes, I was thinking about whether or not I should like change this function so I return this value, or I add this value to the edge, and then I do the physics calculation based on this value here, because then the forces would be different. It would depend on what node it is. The problem is that it changes everything, because I'm using this one on the other solvers as well. Like when you move the nodes, you have to redraw the edges, so I'm using that to redraw as well. I think this offset is just the radius, and then it's 0 on the when it's creating a new one, because it's just copying the old one. Yeah. So what can I do here? Thinking I should probably make some steps, like break down this into more steps to clarify my mind. Use Spring Solver so it works with basic curves. This seems is always the same. Breaks down edge in the middle by creating a visible node. This is the thing though, I think like maybe it's better to create the third node. Like, if I create the third node, I'm gonna have to change the functions here, I think. Which probably is gonna be here. So the thing that I'm thinking about is whether or not it's worth to create the other node, because it's obviously easier if I just get the position based on the two nodes that I have here. Which is gonna be this one, and then I pass an object that has its positions here, and then it's gonna calculate the same. Because obviously I don't want to change this function, so the object has to have the group. But then the issue with that is that it's recreating the object each time that it loops. I think it's not very good. So for that reason, I think it might be better to just create on the edge. Like create the third node on the edge, and then it has to be based on the curved boolean, so, or this string that I'm gonna pass. So it's probably better to create instead of this function, but then because like starting to think that it's probably better to just rethink the way that I did this stuff, because I got it from the other project. Like some of the functions and the other ones I did it, but it doesn't seem that it is very good. I think this is the feeling that I have. I think that the breakdown of the functions is kind of off. So what would be an easier way? I think it's better if I just get... If instead of putting this check here, I just put it inside of this function instead. The thing is, I will still need to figure the other stuff out. I still need to put the other function there. That's the thing. Not sure if that makes like a lot of difference. The problem is, it does get a little confusing, I think. I need to think about this one separately from the edges as well. Like the other parts where I'm moving the nodes based on the physics. I think this is the hardest part. Like this. So maybe the first thing that I should do is just refactor this first, like delete these functions here and then just import the other one. Then I'll think about it. I think delete first, then import, and then see if nothing breaks. And after that, I create another function just to update the edges. And then I remove this, or I pass this function instead of the other one. Try to think what is the best. If I have multiple different types of edges, like what is the best way to put the logic so that it creates the edge based on the value of the type. Obviously, I think like a switch or sequence of if-else would be better. And I think a switch makes more sense. It just switches on the type, which is going to be the curved. Depending on which case it is, it creates the class. So I think the question that I need to answer is whether or not all of the different types. So first, I think I need to... I think I'm going to delete everything here because I already did. Figure out if three.js has the different classes. I think that's the first thing that I need to do because it doesn't make sense to spend all their bunch of time and then three.js doesn't have the edges, the geometries. Three.js doesn't have the geometries, then obviously I can think about a way to put the meshes together and all of the other stuff to create the geometry. But I think that is a waste of time, and I'm better off spending time on the other stuff because this is just a nuance. Hey, thanks DBOZ, DBoss, BOZ. I guess the annoying thing is this, but I think there isn't like much I can do about it. But it's just a lot of different variables to create the thing. So I'm trying to think about like if there's a way to simplify this. It doesn't feel like it is correct, but maybe like the thing is it might be just because of the like three.js that it gets complicated. I guess the thing that I don't like about this, like there's also the alternative of using the other library to create the edge, but the problem with that one is that I think I can't do the Bezier curves with that one, but maybe I should study that as well. That's the thing, because the biggest issue with this one that I don't like that much is that I have to create another class just to pass through the tube geometry so that it works. So like you have to create the curve and then pass through the tube geometry. It feels like it's a waste of computation. There might be a better way to do it. Okay, instead of sending the curve, if you just pass like, instead of creating the mesh for the curve, if you could just pass the positions for the curve. So I don't understand why do I need to... And the other library was line mesh, or... Yeah, there was another library that I was using before as well that it seemed more simple, but then I think you can't create curved geometries. So I think I'm just gonna spend some time studying VisJS now and seeing if I can understand. And so if I create the via node, I have to create here. So I guess the question is, where would I create the third node? I think it has to be at the same time I create this thing. I think this is the reason why I want to change this. And that's the thing. Because I want to add this stuff on the... I want to add this on the edge. Or I want to make the third node based on this value. I think this is the thing. So that way I wouldn't need this function as well. And maybe it would even be more accurate than VisJS. Because that's the actual point that creates the curve. So I need to understand this function better. And then I think I need to... Yeah, I need to separate this from inside of here. But maybe I'll use the same. I think I won't put this function here because I'm gonna use it on the other ones. So I think the only thing I have to do is just change this one. And then I leave it like this. And then I create another function called update edge, which just uses that one. So I just put this logic, or update edges, and then I pass the edge. And oh, the problem is I need the node map. This is another annoying thing, but then I'm gonna think about it way later on because I'm using graphology. But it would be a lot better if the nodes were nested objects instead of listed objects, because I have to pass this node map here, which maps the ID of the node with the node, because the edge only has the IDs. So I need to get the actual node from the ID, and that's the reason why. But maybe I can accept the node map on the edges, update edges function as well. Or just accept positions. No, but the positions doesn't make sense because it has to loop over all of them. So the curved is gonna change to a string. So, but I think that the first thing I need to do is to do this. Yeah, I guess the other thing that I don't understand is whether or not this is like X, Y, and Z. I think it has to be. It's gonna be a vector tree, I think. I'm just gonna put from position. Yeah, but the thing is, it has to be... So maybe inside of the curve, I do a switch here. And then based on the switch, I return this stuff. Yeah, so I put the straight case first. Now the question is, I think I put the lat here, or maybe I put the lat outside. So I'm gonna do this one, then I'm gonna study the... Yeah, I have to refactor the other stuff, so I'm gonna refactor the other stuff. Then I'm gonna study the thing. Because obviously if they accept different arguments, then it's gonna change here. And the thing is, I have to pass the edge here as well. So maybe instead of passing curved, I pass the edge. But then I'm not really sure if it's a good idea. Like, this is something else that I was thinking about, because I was contemplating whether or not it's worth to put try-catch blocks inside, because there can be... as I was doing the stuff that I had an error because of one of the solvers had like a position that is undefined, and when there is a position that is undefined, it just breaks the thing. But I decided not to put for now because I think it's better to make the thing break if there isn't a position, because then obviously it's not working. But maybe it's better to just, because obviously we don't want the website to crash as well. Like if there's a situation that I didn't test and then like it would break the thing. So this thing reminds me of that, because if I pass edge here and I make based on the curved, then I think it would break if I just test for edge.curved here. So we need to put another condition in the beginning. Hey, I'm not sure how to say your name or nickname. I guess this is the reason why I was thinking about moving the function tree here. Because then I could just use, instead of passing the edge around like everywhere, I could just use here. Yeah, but I can pass through here as well, edge.curved, and I don't need to pass as an argument. Just realized that. So I think I'm gonna do that now. Oh, I was thinking about passing the edge because I'm gonna need... I wanna put this point on the edge. So here I would do like edge.via equals curve points via. Or actually, it's not an object, so. And then I can use this one on the other one. And just be via. Oh, the thing is, it would have to be a group, so maybe I would change this one to return an object instead. Or I can just do... like if I create an object here, and I put... if I make this equal to an object that has group, and then equal to the position. This is stuff that I mean that is kind of annoying to think about. Is yeah. I think it's probably better to study VisJS first, then I'll go back to this. So I just do this like the way that it is here for now. I think I'm probably not gonna use this function. I think this way is better, because then I get the actual points from the curve. But I need to figure out what is the best way to put the value on the edge. So for now, let me think. Yeah, I have to change here. And now I think I have to change the star as well. No, it's on the configuration components. Oh, the other thing I was thinking about is whether or not I should create two different stores. Like, I should create two different custom input components. And I think I'm gonna have to do that, but for now it's not necessary. But the issue is that the way that I did the other one, it is tied to the config store. And then I realized that for updating the graphs is better if I just use the graph store. But then if I use the graph store, I either put like additional functionality on the custom input component, just select which kind of store based on a prop. But I think that is not very good because it does like, I don't know, it makes more confusing to understand, I think. So I think it's better to just create another component for the graph store. But for now, I didn't need a component because with the selection boxes, I'm also, and maybe I should change just realized this now that I was gonna do in the beginning. But I'm not really sure. The problem with doing the component is that it makes you, like, you have to generalize what you're gonna do on the selection based on this. And I think this is the reason why I decided to do the selections on the component itself, because then it depends on the, but I guess I can just put the store here, like get the values of the store from the store here on this component, and then just use this one. Maybe I should do that as well. Because it just takes a lot of space here. But it's a lot easier to do it like this, because then everything's on the same page. I guess the problem is the functions. because I don't want to declare the function each time here because it doesn't make sense. So I guess this is the biggest issue. So because like if you create a custom component and you pass everything as props, then the function that you create inside of the component has to be generic because it has to work for everything that is going to happen. Everything that can happen with the selection boxes. I think this is the problem. And I wonder if anyone has thought about this, like if there's a known solution for this. But that's the relationship here, I think. Like creating the trade-off when you create a component is that you lose flexibility to gain in efficiency, let's say, like in repeating yourself less. So I think this is the trade-off. And whenever you need, and I had the same problem when I was creating the blog as well with Next.js, that because like when in the way that the pages work on Next.js, like it was the same thing that was happening with the link, that the link was static and the routes were dynamic. So it becomes very difficult to make it work. And the only way to work, I guess there isn't a known solution for this because it's very nuanced and it's gonna depend on the case. But the fundamental problem, I think, is that the function, if you're gonna use functions inside of the child component, then the function has to be generic, and you're gonna have to create a logic that determines how to create the flow. So like you're gonna have to create a bridge in the same way that I did here, I think, where you create another function that it works like a controller that passes the logic. So whatever happens on the function is gonna go through the other function, and then the other function is gonna decide what is gonna happen based on the props you give. But it just makes things a lot more complicated. That's the problem. And the upside is that you don't repeat yourself as much, I think. But there's probably a way to solve this. Like maybe I'm thinking about it the wrong way as well. I guess it's like very similar to the way that context works. It's the same fundamental problem that context has, I think. But then because context doesn't work with functions, I think that's the... But maybe you can use... But use callback is not the same, I think. Because it's just gonna cache the function definition, but it's not for like teleporting the function from one place to the other. I guess I can create another file and then I can import the function. I think that's the way. But even that, it wouldn't work because I would still need the logic to decide like how is the function gonna be used. Because the same component would be used at like a bunch of different places. So depending on what places that it is used, and then the issue is that like if it's a fixed amount of places, different places you're gonna use, then it's one kind of logic. But if it's a generic amount, like I don't know how many selection boxes I'm gonna put here and so how many customizations I'm gonna make. So if I design a function with a switch, for example, that decides where, like which function is gonna be called, it's not gonna work because it's not generic enough. Because then every time that I refactor one part, it's gonna have to refactor the other one. So the logic has to be generic for selecting the functions. And this is something that I'm realizing as well. I think like the more complex it becomes, like because there's a lot of instances where I change one thing at one part of the code and then I have to change on every other place. And obviously I think there are things to deal with this, but I'm not like aware of them. And obviously I think that this is the reason why people do tests, is because it allows you to like see how everything is working. which I didn't have to do before because the stuff that I built wasn't that complex. So I think this is a good point actually to write down on the stuff that I have, the ideas that I have, because it's something that I can do. Because the problem here is, yeah, I think this is a very good thing actually. Maybe I'll try to do something like this, and maybe it's not that hard. The fundamental problem is knowing if you want to change something in the code where all of this stuff is used, so you can change automatically. Or not change automatically, but you can understand how the change in one place is going to affect all the other places. But I think I have to think more about this, because I think that like it's the same feeling that I have about types. Like I don't agree that much. I think there's a better way probably. Because the way that it feels to me, like, and maybe I'm wrong about this, I'm not really sure. It might be like a lack of experience. But the feeling that I have is that every time that there is a type, like the purpose of the type is to describe what is being used. But the issue with this is that a lot of the times you have to understand the type to understand what's being used. And like what I was thinking before is that like maybe because the way that I always do it is I try to go through every function and I can try to see how the logic of the function works, and then how it's going to change the stuff inside of the function, and then how everything's going to change inside of the whole thing. And the way that the types work is that for some reason, but this is the thing that I can't quite put into words, but when you look at the type definition, like there's a lot of stuff that is missing, I think. But maybe it's because I don't like understand very well, or there's like something I'm missing. But it always feels to me that when I go to the type definition, it doesn't give me enough information from the stuff that I'm trying to understand. So it feels like it's kind of one of those things that like it hurts more than it helps, because it's just creating another layer and then it doesn't solve the core fundamental of the issue, I think. And I think the core fundamental is understanding how the thing works. But then what got me thinking about this is that maybe it's not necessary, and maybe it's just a lack of experience, because maybe the only thing that matters is to see like what you get as a result of the logic. But I think that's not the case. I think it's more likely that the logic that happens inside matters, and it's much more about increasing the understanding you have over the overall logic, instead of seeing the stuff that is received or passed through the function, like the data structure that is passed or received. And I guess the reason why is because when you're coding, like whenever you're gonna change something on code or add different code, what matters is not what's the data structures that are currently being used, being passed or received. What matters is the design of the whole thing and this geometrical structure of the whole application that is gonna shape the information. So it's much more important, much more about understanding than seeing like what is being passed and what is being received. And I think that it is the same kind of logic for the testing thing, where like test solves the issue of seeing if something is gonna break. But I think that there might be like a better way, because but maybe testing there isn't, because the more complex it becomes, the harder it becomes to see if there's anything that is gonna break. I guess like I have to think about why does it break. I have to think about more the question of like how is it possible that you can create a task. You can have enough understanding to create a task that is gonna task for something to break, but you at the same time you can't test that directly. If that makes sense. Like if you're capable enough of creating the task that is gonna check if something breaks, then why aren't you capable of preventing that mistake in the first place? I guess that's the question. It's kind of like the paradox of the AI issue. So like, if you can predict what an AI would do, and then you can prevent the attacks and the stuff, then it means that by definition the AI is not as intelligent as you. So it's kind of the same thing as tasks, I think. So I guess it's probably worth writing this down, because like by thinking about this stuff, I'm gonna have... I think it has to do with the visualization thing, because I think that these two things are connected. And it's probably just a symmetry as well. I think that, and I might be more unbalanced towards the side of understanding, but there is another side that is also important. But obviously it's connected, because the more you understand, the less likely it is that you're gonna create something that doesn't work. So I think that at the core of the issue is probably like, it is lack of understanding, but the question is how you go about your lack of understanding. So if you make it easier to understand how everything works, it becomes less likely that you're gonna create a bug at somewhere in the system that is gonna break everything and that you didn't like predict. But at the same time, like as the complexity grows exponentially, then it becomes exponentially harder to understand things, because I think the key of the issue is the variance of the data, because the code never changes, but what changes is the variance. This is another thing that I was thinking about before, but maybe I'm not going to talk about this stuff now. So the question is why? How is it possible for people create to think it might be a synchronization, coordination issue as well. Because when you work with a lot of people, like the system grows in ways that you don't control because it's too complex. So so tests might be coordination problems. So I guess the question would be, how do you make this better? Like, why is a coordination problem? So I think the fundamental is the thing about the complexity. Because as complexity grows, you need a network. And then the network, and it's the same problem you have with politics and science and everything, that the feedback loop system gets corrupted and is related to the way that human beings think. Because we are not scalable in space-time. So it becomes increasingly more likely that as there is a bigger distance in space-time, that is going to become more corrupted. Because everything is based on a network. And the way that the market economy works is you have specializations. Everyone specializes in their own thing, and then they coordinate to solve bigger problems. So the fundamental parts are like the level of complexity of the thing, how many nodes there are on the network, and how further apart they are. I think the further apart is the problem with the... I forgot how it's said, like, in English. The thing where you say something to one person and then they say what you said for another person, and then it goes on. And then by the end, the message is completely different because it was corrupted across time. Because everyone says it slightly different. I think this is related with the tests as well. So if you have a bunch of different people working on the same project, then the complexity is gonna grow in a way that neither of the nodes in the network that are creating the software are aware of the structure of the whole. So it creates pockets of noise, and then that increases exponentially because you have this loss of information through the network as the message is passed. And then tests are systems that update the synchronization or coordination of the thing. I think that might be the case. So the question is, how can what can I do to make this better? Through the visualization. But I'm trying to remove the people. Like, how do you solve? Because obviously it's a fundamental problem, so... Because ideally you wouldn't need to... For example, one thing you could do is just highlight, like share the graph between people and then highlight the points of where they are working. But obviously there's something fundamental about the way that the tasks are done. So it might be the same thing actually here. Maybe this is the reason why I started thinking about this now. Because I think it's the exact same problem. Not the exact same, but it's very similar. Because it's the same thing here. Like the way that you create a task, it has to be generic to test whatever you wanted to test. But at the same time, it's going to be the trade-off. Because obviously it's going to be, I think it's going to be between a range, because you don't want to make tasks that are too specific, because then you have too many tasks. And you don't want to make the tasks that are generic, because then it's not going to test well. Because there's too many different things to predict. So the answer is obviously going to be somewhere in the middle. So there's going to be a relationship between how specific the tests are and how generic they are. And it's going to be a funnel of information, I think. It's going to be a hierarchy based on the importance of the points of the system. So I'm gonna study the VisJS thing and I'll think about this later. I think it's interesting because then when I start trying to create the compilers, I'm gonna have this thing in mind, and then I can think about different ways, different things that I can build to make this better. Because I don't like the idea of doing tasks. I think the main reason is because of this thing here. The main reason I don't like it is but I remember, I think I saw at some point someone talking about this, and there was an explanation for this. Like, how is it possible for people to think about tasks that can find out problems that they were not capable of preventing or fixing when coding the software? Because it's not, like, I'm not saying that it is the case that you will be able to predict everything and solve everything. Obviously, you're going to make mistakes. But the question is whether or not, like, your ability to test for the mistakes you could potentially make are higher than your ability to fixing the mistakes. The other alternative would be for automation, because like obviously it's better to create a template that checks for the same mistakes each time, and then as you change the code, it makes like a standard. This is another reason why I think it's both coordination and standard. Let me focus on this stuff. I'll think about that later. So the way that it works here is like all the edges, I think I saw this in the past, and all the edges are inherit from the base class, which is going to be a class that has abstract functions, like this one and this one, which are just functional definitions that are going to be set by each specific class. So the base class creates a template and creates these abstract classes, and then the other ones, they specify on which type of the edge is going to be based on these functions. So I think that this gets the node in the middle, and this gets the points. Probably, but I don't know really well. So I think the main thing I have to do here, I'm probably not going to spend a bunch of time studying this, because I think I already figured out what is important there to create the edges. So I think the main thing I have to do is just get the names of all the edges that are used through the types, and then I see if there's an equivalent, because they're all going to be Bezier curves, I think, and the only difference is going to be when the curves break down based on the points. And to be honest, I want to think more about this now because it's more interesting to me. Maybe I should just spend some time now. Like, I want to study the thing here because I put that on the title of the thing, but... So I guess I'll try to figure out, because it's not going to be this exact name, obviously. So I'll try to figure out what is the curve that they are using, or if they are using some curve, or if it's just an arbitrary calculation based on the points. I think this is the thing, like types are helpful, but they are missing the point, I think. So the ideal situation, I think, would be you only put types when you want to, and you're not forced by the compiler to put types everywhere. Because like this stuff, it makes more complicated, it doesn't help, because then I have to figure out what this is. And then it's going to be a type definition, but the type definition is going to be, there's going to be other stuff that I might not know. And then I'm going to have to study the software anyway. So like you're just adding more complexity to, because now I have to understand the types. And then from the types, I have to study the software anyway. So why not just study the software to understand what this is? But then at the same time, it is good because if you do understand the software already, then it makes it easier for you to know in different parts of the code what happens. So I think this is the reason why the middle ground is you have types at some points, but then you don't make it a necessity to have types. And this is going to be any, I already saw this. I think the type of curve is always the same. What changes is the position of the third node. But based on the function there, it seems like it is always on the middle, so maybe not. The difficult part about understanding this, I have to understand how it's used here. But I think that this comes from the options. So when you put this, it's gonna return this one, and this is gonna be the one that is used on the physics engine. Is the edge type here. So it just gets the type, which is an object that is gonna contain. It's gonna be this class here, and this is gonna have the via node, which is created inside of each one of this. But the problem is where, at what point is this? I think it's on the canvas render that is gonna draw this stuff. Where's the edges? Right here. So it calls the draw method. Maybe it's on the base edge. There isn't a draw function here. Oh, maybe it's on the edge itself. Yeah. I guess the via nodes. Yeah, I think the only thing that changes is probably the points. No, but the physics is always the same, but the points that you use to draw are different. I think it's coming from this one. It's just a massive object with a bunch of specifications. I think this is the same thing that I did there with the dragging. This is gonna be an attribute on the edge to see if it's selected or not. And then this the same thing with this one, I think. So it's probably gonna be this one. So it passes the context that are massive objects. And the via node, which is just that node that is going to be invisible and it's going to be in the middle. Yeah, so the difference is gonna be on the... Oh, but maybe this is another function. But I guess I need to see... I need to understand more how this via node, like exactly what it's gonna be. Because obviously I know that the X and Y is gonna be here, like it's gonna be these positions, but I need to see if there's gonna be anything else. So the line is gonna be here. And this is the function that is used, and it passes the via node. So I guess it is different because each one of them is gonna have a different implementation of this curve, of this line function. And this line is the one that is gonna draw, but it always uses the same 3 points, I think. The only difference that it has is that it changes, it calls these methods here. So I think I'm gonna ask ChatGPT if there's an equivalent for that in three.js. Because I think this is the method that is gonna use, and the other one is not gonna. Because I think this is always gonna be true for the dynamic edge. Oh, maybe not actually. Maybe this is when you have 2 different points. Yeah, so maybe the other one is the one that is used. I think I have to go back and see. Edge type is gonna be the class that is this one. So it's gonna be get via node from this one, which is gonna be the via from there. Yeah, but it's only passing one node. That's the weird thing. Because if you always pass one node, then how is it possible that some situations it's gonna have two different nodes there. So the only explanation would be if the nodes is inside of this one, but I don't think that's the case. Yeah, from true. Or maybe it's this one. Yeah, it's this one. I was looking at the wrong file. Yeah, but based on this code, it's never gonna pass the from point and the true point. It just passes the via node, which is this one. So I'm trying to understand how is it possible. It doesn't make any sense. Because this one accepts this 4 and then the other one passes 3 arguments. So like if that's the case, there will never be a situation where there's should there. Oh, this is from the other thing. Like if this, I guess it makes sense now, because yeah, from this one there's always going to be one via node, but from other types of edges there might be a situation where there is more than one. So I guess it's always going to be this condition here, a quadratic curve, because there's always only one. So this one is the one that I want, probably. I think I'm just gonna add this other one because yeah, and I'm gonna see how it looks obviously, but I think I'm just gonna leave this 3. So I think this one is the best and the other ones is not like, it's just a detail, so it's not worth spending a bunch of time, and I have to study the compilers and interpreters and focus more on that part. So I think once I implement this one, then I'm not gonna implement the arrows as well. I'm just gonna start focusing on the other part because it's more important, I think. And then eventually I come back to this. But maybe I should fix the label first. Try to see if it's easier to fix the label. Maybe I'll ask. I'm gonna ask ChatGPT now, and then I'm gonna think about it. But today, after I stop streaming, I think I'm gonna focus more on the... I'm gonna make the videos first, then I'll think about this stuff later. But what I'm gonna do probably is copy this line here, and then I can just use this one and pass there. Maybe this one is not the best. Because it seems like it works with 2D vectors. Yeah, so I think the quadratic only works with 2D dimensions, so I need to figure out one that is the same or similar to this one, but works for 3 dimensions. And after I figure this out, then all I have to do is just put another case there. I didn't test to see if it works or not. It looks like it is not working. Somewhere here. Oh, I think it's on the physics engines, maybe. Yeah. No, I'm passing edge not curved. I mean, maybe typed would be better as well, instead of curve. It's probably the problem is here. I'm already getting tired, so I think I'm gonna stop some. Oh, it's because I'm not returning. That's why. So if I return here instead of breaking. Should probably put to lowercase as well. or just do. But I think it's better to do it like this, but then I should probably put to lowercase. So why is it like this now? Obviously, it should be an issue here. It was just a typo. Maybe it's because of here. Oh, here. I think it's because of this. So first initializes as straight, and then here. No. Yeah, I don't know why this is happening. Be here. It's probably something with this switch. Yeah, I have no idea. I think I'm gonna stop here. I'm gonna take a break and then I'll solve this soft string. But probably what I'm gonna do is after I solve this, is just put another condition there. And then I'm gonna figure out this equivalent to the quadratic basic curve. Oh, it's this one. So it's already using this one. So all I have to do is figure out the points. I didn't even realize that it's probably the same, so. And I think the only difference based on this stuff is gonna be the points. But I still have to spend some time figuring this out, like the via node, because it doesn't make sense. Like, it probably creates different points, so the function that I copied there is probably different for each one. Because otherwise it wouldn't make any sense. Like this function here. So I think it initializes the via node with different positions for each one, and then based on the positions it uses the same function, which is that one. So all I have to do is figure out how is the via node changing from each class. And this is the thing that I didn't understand as well. Like, I assume that this says that it is gonna be set here, the shoe classes above, and then on set options set support null. But I think it uses that function. it's so weird that it's not working now. Probably forgot something. Maybe it's on the drag, but I think on the drag I'm also using the... And it wouldn't make sense because... So it has to be here, I think. And it's not console logging here. So it means that it's not here the problem. Maybe it's on the... No, it can't be here as well. Oh, is this one? That's the problem. It's because I was using... Yeah, so I should remove these ones here. Yeah, there we go. Nice. Oh, it's here. So, let me think. Oh, I didn't change here the value. What's this? Oh, let me think. Oh, it's because I didn't pass the edge. But I think now it should be working. Yeah. So I think I'm gonna spend some time now thinking about this stuff about tasks. And then I'm gonna stop here and I'm gonna fix the other stuff off stream. I'm just gonna spend some time studying, trying to understand where the differences between the positions on the via nodes, and then trying to understand this function more. And yeah, because I'm gonna have to change this function here to represent the same, because this one is the one that determines where the middle point is gonna be. And then I pass this, I'm gonna put this inside of the edge, and then with this value I'm gonna change the physics there as well. So let me think about this. I think that the question is, how can I highlight things in a way that is gonna allow people to not need to test the thing? Not need to test, but reduce the amounts that tests are necessary, let's say, or increase the reliability of tests, because now you understand what parts are fundamental, I think. So I have to think about some questions about tests that are gonna help me clarify, because I don't have experience building tests. So I have to clarify what is the middle ground of tests? When you create a task, what is the logic behind it? Like, what is the thinking? Do you create a task for a specific function, or you create tasks for like patterns? How does that work? Yeah, so I think that this is probably the question. I should probably watch some videos. I think it goes hand in hand. I think maybe what I'm gonna do now is just off stream is just to try to fix this thing first, then I'll do the videos for the updates, and then after that I'm not gonna spend time anymore working on the visualization, I think. I have to do the moving as well, so I think this is the last thing that I'm gonna do. Just figure out a way to move this div here, to drag the div. And then after that, I'm gonna focus on the other parts. That's probably the right thing to do. And yeah, maybe I think I'll try to solve this first before making the videos. It's gonna depend on how hard it is. And then after I fix the edges and this, then I'm gonna think about this. And I think that thinking about the task is gonna help me to think about something that I can try to do right away to create a visualization out of it. So I think it's worth spending some time thinking about. Like, what is the core of the thing that I'm trying to understand, so I can think about the visualization in a way that is gonna be helpful. So I need to understand why and what is the range, I think. So why are tests done? So obviously they are done to prevent something that, because the system is complex, you can't really understand, or you can't really see. I guess the main thing is how, like, all the possible ways that the thing can be used. Yeah, so I wanna stop here. I'm gonna work on this. Then after I work on this, I'm gonna study these things. So I might study this stuff on next stream, or I might study off stream and then just stream a very long time from now, because I still have to watch a bunch of videos about compilers as well. But I think next time, hopefully, I'm gonna focus more on the interpreter and compiler sides of things and trying to build the graphs. I also have to test if changing the data structures there, like the nodes and edges that I'm passing, if it's gonna work. But I'll do that off stream. And then next time I'm gonna focus on interpreters and compilers. I'm not really sure when I'm gonna come back, but yeah. So see you then.